Hello and welcome to Just Follow Joy. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name's Ariana. I'm your host. I'm a human design reader and teacher, and my goal is to make human design accessible and awesome for everyone. Today, we're talking all about the manifestor energy type, again, with someone I love talking about manifestors with, and honestly love just talking about human design with, Holly Herbig. Holly is the world's leading specialist in human design manifestors. She facilitates the official online teaching community exclusively for manifestors called the Manifestor Community, aptly. She's a certified human design and Gene Keys teacher and also a business owner with over 15 years experience in multi-million and multi-six-figure businesses under her belt. She's a certified clinical hypnotherapist, breathwork, EFT, and meditation practitioner, a Reiki 2 healer, and a certified trauma-informed life and success coach. When it comes to her human design chart, Holly is a 4/6 splenic manifestor. And when it comes to life, Holly is a badass. So Holly and I actually did an episode on manifestors about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was fantastic. If you haven't seen it or listened to it, definitely go check it out. I told Holly on this episode, it's actually one of the most popular podcast episodes I've ever released. But we still had so much to talk about after that because we could just keep talking about manifestors forever. And since she just released her new book, Informed, we figured that now would be the perfect time to do it. Informed is the ultimate resource manual for manifestors. And honestly, whether you're a manifestor or not, I highly, highly recommend you check it out. For manifestors, this is going to answer so many of your questions and give you guidance on how to create the life you want on your terms. As someone who is built to operate very, very differently from 92% of the population, you guys are really one of a kind. And this book is so detailed and so in-depth and so full of actionable steps that you can actually take right now to start aligning with the kind of life you want, no matter where you are in your journey as a manifestor, no matter how burnt out, how angry, I was about to say disappointed, then I was about to say frustrated. I was like, none of those are your not self themes. No matter how angry you're feeling, no matter how out of alignment you're feeling, this book can really, really help and give you a new insight on things. And if you're a non-manifestor, this is just a great way to get to see the energy type in a new way that I doubt you have before. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. But before we dive in, a quick reminder that if you like this episode, if you like Just Follow Joy, if you like getting free human design info on the reg, don't forget to like and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. So with all that said, let's go talk to Holly. So Holly, I'm so excited to have you back on. It's been, I think, like 2 years since I last talked to you.
I know. How wild has the last 2 years been? I feel like collectively it was just a blink and we're here, but at the same time, it felt really long to be in it. But retrospectively, it's really fast. So I'm enjoying like circling back to a lot of people and being like, oh my gosh, how have you been for the last 2 years? What's going on with you?
Yeah, what's happening? Have you been getting other emails like mine being like, hey, heard you wrote a book. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I actually have. I've actually had quite a resurgence of people coming back into my space, but I also think that's pretty typical for a manifestor, right? Like when we do a big creation, then we go into a big rest period and it can't reach me in that rest period. I'm out. I'm not available for anyone. So like every manifestor, my energy coming back online almost always initiates this kind of unconscious response from people where all of a sudden they start showing up again and they start wanting to talk to me. It probably looks a bit strange for the rest of the world, but for a manifestor, this is a pretty normal little atypical rhythm that we live in.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because I was just talking to another manifestor who has been holding on to this like information for 20 years that she just released. And she told people in this group close to her, this some kind of like metaphysical group or whatever that she was in, I think I'm ready to share this now. And she said 15 people reached out to her for readings. And then 3 people reached out to her for other information that she's been holding on for a long time and has been like ready to release. And I'm like, yeah, that's just, it's so manifestor for it to work that way, right? And as soon as she informed, the sea parted and it came together for her. And it's just that's so cool.
That's the vibe. And I think the same as it is with every energy type, even outside of human design, take the human design language away for it. The human experience is that the very thing that is most powerful and most natural for us is usually the area that we struggle with the most. That's usually our biggest area of wounding. It is very common for manifestors to hold back on stuff for a really long period of time for fear that it's going to be misunderstood, that they're going to be rejected, that people are going to take it and do something bad with it, or that they're going to be controlled through it. Or there's so many fears that come up. And I love hearing stories like that of manifestors who just reach the point where they're like, screw it. Just, I'm just going out with it anyway. And then because the energy is there, the initiation is correct, people respond immediately. That's the joy of it. The powerful mechanical balance of it.
And you know what? She's a splenic manifestor too. And she said that the reason why she shared that is because she heard a voice just tell her, like, it's time to share this. And she went for it. And I was like, an urge if I ever did hear one, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. As a fellow splenic manifestor, I relate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your new book, Informed, which any manifestors listening, I'm sure that most of the people listening to this probably are going to be manifestors who follow me or somehow find this. My last video that I put up, Holly, you'd laugh so much at this. So it's one of like my most popular videos on YouTube. People love this interview. The manifestors feel so seen by it. The comments are so funny. This one person was like, I almost didn't listen to this podcast because it had the word joy in it and it wasn't peaceful enough for me. But then I saw it was Holly and I listened to it and I was like, good call. And I was like, also fair. Joy is a little bit like anyone can feel joy, obviously, but that's like kind of generator coded. And I was like,
I always feel this urge to apologize to the rest of the world on behalf of manifestors for like our weirdness. I'm like, I'm so sorry that we're completely resistant and like unreasonably. So just give us a minute and we'll get on board. Okay. It's got to give us a little time.
I get it. No, I was like, no worries. I get this. That's totally cool. But I love them. But what was I about to say with this? Oh, but your book covers so much in such depth. And to the manifestors listening, this is a must read, in my opinion. Don't let me be telling you what to do, but this is.
She's not telling you what to do.
I'm just giving you neutral information. I think it's a really good book. But it's such a fantastic book that I would highly recommend for any manifestor trying to understand themselves and definitely for other people who want to peek behind the curtain a little bit for how manifestors work. And one of the things that you go in depth with is urges. And it's a little bit later on in the book, but I'm assuming that you wrote this book because you had a creative urge that came up. And what did that feel like for you this time? What was the process of getting this urge to write this book? Is this the first book you've written?
Yeah, this is the first book that I've done. And thank you for reading it, and thank you for saying such lovely things about it. It's always novel as a manifest when you're like, oh my god, people interacted with something that I created. Wild. For me, I think that the really interesting part about writing this book was that it wasn't a typical creative urge. I think that I've gone through this process as a manifestor so many times, and obviously I study this at depth and I experience it at depth, and this is definitely my area of mastery. This is where I'm the consummate student. I feel like I've got so much experience underneath my belt in terms of understanding an urge, feeling an urge when it comes through, taking the right initiation pathway, and then releasing it at the right time, that it's become a bit like subconscious, right? That's become natural to do, which I know sounds insane to a lot of the manifestors who are probably listening, because it takes a long time to get to that point. But when I was going through the process of writing the book, and for about a year before that, I was really in a place where I wanted to stretch my capacity as a manifestor. I wanted to see how far my initiating energy could take me and what were all of the nuances around that. If I've mastered the basics of the system, then where do I go to next? And my business's design itself, so the design of the Manifestor Community, is also a manifestor. It's a 2/4 emotional manifestor. And so I have this kind of fun duality of working in this business where sometimes it's my urges and sometimes it's the business's urges. And the book was definitely a business urge. And so I sat with it. I sat with it for nearly 2 years thinking it's cool. When I have enough initiating energy left over, I'll get onto the book process, right? Like I had an outline for it. I knew exactly what it was going to be. But of course, I never had energy because I would initiate my own urges and then I'd go into a rest cycle and then I'd be exhausted and then I'd come back out and repeat the same thing again. And I got to the point where I really felt that growing creative urge pressure to it just had to get done. It had to get created and it had to get out. but it felt like it was a pressure from outside of me. And I was just part of a process in doing that. So I actually enlisted a lot of help with it. And I worked with one of our kind of long-standing copywriters in our business who's also a manifestor. She's a 1/3 emotional manifestor, and she does ghostwriting as well. She and I work together to take all of the content and the teaching that we have had in the Manifestor community for 4 or 5 years now, and we culminated it and brought it all together and reshaped it into the book. For me, on an individual level as a manifestor, it was such a different experience of initiating something because it didn't have that simplicity and refinement of just a straight up creative urge, right? Like, I didn't receive the vision and get the go ahead and initiate it and go into the frenzy and the madness and then it's done and then I rested. Like, this was a labor of love. I had to put a lot of initiating energy into it. I needed help to do it. My team was extraordinary in bringing the whole marketing and release and sales together. And I think that the cute thing for me, it probably doesn't sound cute when I describe it, but it felt cute. The cute like support from the universe for me during that process was that I started it and then I was like, oh, I'm getting busy with other stuff. And I'm not really dedicating myself to this. And then I was out hiking one day and I fell down and did a major fracture of my leg and my ankle and needed a ankle reconstruction, which meant that I was down. I literally had to sit down or lay down for 7 weeks. I couldn't weight bear at all. So I couldn't stand up for 7 weeks. And that's where the whole damn book got written, in that 7 weeks. So I really felt like the universe was just giving me that extra shove over the line to be like, literally push me to the ground. Here we go. You need a captured time to write the book. Here, you've got a captured time to write the book.
The perfect wording. You're scaring me a little shove. And the universe said she informed she wanted to write a book, and so she will.
We made it possible for her. I really do owe what we see now as the book to that capsule of time. So it's nostalgic for me looking back on that.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. It too, especially because your design as a splenic manifestor that's so instantaneous with your authority, and then having a business that's an emotional manifestor, that's so the opposite, right? And I remember that you had this beautiful article on the different authorities. And by the way, in the book, everyone listening, she goes in depth into using these authorities and even like how these urges will come to you as well, as manifestors with different kinds of authorities. But I remember you having this beautiful article talking about being an emotional manifestor and how that can be, as it can be with anyone with emotional authority, a confusing existence when it comes to making decisions. But when you give yourself time, you'll have a solidity at the end with your urge that maybe somebody with splenic or ego authority doesn't really feel like they'll have as much, because y'all are so instantaneous in how you get that answer. And there's no more background information or context there. So someone going through the ups and downs with the emotional wave, you at least have, I've felt through all of these things. I'm not certain if it'll work, but I feel clear. But that is so different than, I'm sure, being a splenic manifestor. So how interesting. I can imagine that makes a lot of sense why it also might have taken 2 years on top of also like you initiating your own stuff.
Yeah, that's the nuance. I think one of the things that really frustrates me is seeing manifestors, like every energy type, getting all lumped together. So this is the way that all of you behave. This is the way that all MGs behave. This is the way that all generators behave. And there is such distinction, not only in deeper layers of the design, but just on that first layer when we go into authority. And when we play that into the manifestor experience, of course that changes the way that we receive a creative urge and the way that we initiate a creative urge. So typically we see emotional manifestors do longer, deeper creative urges because they have to go through that physical whole body process of actually moving through the emotions before they've even gotten to a decision about the urge, which does afford them more certainty. A lot of emotional manifestors are probably like screaming right now, I feel completely certain. Nobody does. There's
Yeah.
never any complete certainty about anything, but there's a lot more clarity around the timing and the rightness and the depth of something. They're physically involved in the process. Whereas, like a splenic or an ego manifestor, we tend to do shorter, sharper creative urges. So we'll come out, we process it fast, but we come out fast too. And we initiate these really big things in these really short spaces of time, and we don't have longevity in it. And we'll go away into the rest. I think it speaks to the importance of why every energy type really needs to understand some of the more kind of flavored levels of their design, because the whole process and the whole purpose of this system is about understanding self. It's about giving permission and space and validation to self. And so you might do it differently from people around you, right? An emotional manifestor might do it really differently to the way that I do it. And that doesn't make either of us any less of a manifestor. It's just a celebration of, hey, we all get to do it in our own way, and it's all beautiful.
Yeah. Another reason why it's great to have this collection of information all together that's so in depth because and segmented, because manifestors are only 8% of the population. So it's so easy to, like, even if you do know another manifestor, then look around and be like, wait a second, that is so different. Holly does it so
That's not
differently
me.
from the way
Yeah.
I do that, right? And especially for you, splenic manifestors are the second rarest kind of manifestor. And so everyone listening to, highly likely that you are an emotional manifestor, because most manifestors, 50% are, or not 50, no, 50% of the population, most manifestors are emotional manifestors.
Yeah, it's about, in the manifestor sector, it's about 80%
Yeah,
are
that
emotional
makes much more
manifestors.
sense.
So the vast majority, yeah.
Yeah, it was like the numbers were not really computing. The math is not mathing at all. But another thing that I really love is that you make this distinction between urges and ideas. And I know that to a lot of people in the human design community, it sounds like obvious that ideas are not the thing that you follow, but not really to everyone. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that manifestors can struggle with. Is this an urge or is this an idea? Because at least for people, and I always tell generators and MGs this when they're like, why can't I act on my ideas? This is stupid. You're saying I have no power. And I'm like, hey, man, if we respond to something from the outside, at least we have clarity. That's what it is, right? That's a surefire thing that this is a response. And when it comes from inside, when you're a manifester and like the only way the universe really speaks to you in order to take action is through you, I'm like, do you see that that can be harder, like to even distinguish those two things? And for those manifestors out there who feel like they're chasing down certain things, and I don't get it. I'm initiating. Why isn't this working? Why aren't my urges coming to be or like getting me anywhere? What would you say to them? What kind of piece of advice would you have to help them differentiate between the two?
Oh, highly likely that you're probably following an idea and trying to initiate an idea. It's usually the telltale sign. Like if you think that you're initiating a creative urge, but it's not actually working out, and people are not grabbing it and they're not responding to it, and it's not having that positive impact that you're really seeking, it's likely that you initiated an idea. That's always the first marker. Manifest is getting so angry and so resentful. I'm doing all of this work and I can't stay consistent at anything, and it's not creating anything. Why? This is where we've got to really get that refinement in place of, what does a creative urge feel like to you and what does an idea feel like to you? Because I actually think that the language in human design is pretty screwed up around this. Like a lot of the content, vast majority of the content out there for manifestors refers to what we create as ideas. And I know that people are using that language colloquially, but to a manifestor who's receiving that and trying to learn about themselves, we don't know that you're using the word ideas loosely. What we're receiving is, oh, okay, yeah, I've got heaps of ideas, especially if you have an undefined head, which is the majority of the population. We're like, I've got 79 ideas a day. I
Watch me
create
initiate.
ideas, and we go ahead and try to initiate
Yeah.
all of those, and they don't work. And we do burn out, and it never gets us anywhere. And so we get stuck in this loop. I think the most helpful distinction really is that a creative urge is always a visceral experience. It comes from your body. It almost has no interplay with your head at all. Sometimes you can receive a vision, like there's an illustrative aspect to the creative urge, but the telltale sign is, do you feel it like a pressure in your body? Do you feel like it is consuming you, like eating you alive? Once you've received that creative urge, there's the sense of, I don't even know if I want to do this, but I cannot put it down. This thing chases me. It haunts me. It won't leave me alone. you'll also get a big surge in your energy. So your physical energy will open up, and you'll get that mania that we get in a creative cycle when the creative urge comes online. And so often it takes a lot of energy for a manifestor to stuff a creative urge down.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that because we're afraid, and we don't think that we're going to be well received, and right, we're going to be rejected, we're going to be abandoned, we're going to be criticized. So we stuff it away and we say, oh, I'll wait for better timing, or I'll wait till I have more energy for it, or I'll wait until it seems more valid or more acceptable. But that is an energy toll in itself. It's like pushing back a tidal wave to do that. An idea is completely different. An idea is like a wisp. It's logical. It makes sense. You can absolutely see why it's valid, why it's going to work out. And that is the illusion, because it feels like it has more validity to it. It has more certainty to it, right?
Yeah.
A creative urge is usually illogical. It's usually, it makes you feel afraid, like it doesn't make sense. You don't know why you're doing it. You don't know why now is the right time. Who wants this? What is this even for? Whereas an idea has that kind of safety built in. Yeah, like I could totally do this. Like I could start a business doing this. People would buy this. Like this would be really good for people. Totally go about and do that. But an idea will pass through. So you might be able to attach your initiating energy to it for a little while, but it'll start petering out within a few weeks. And then you're not connected to it anymore. You don't want it. And so one of the things, like even all these years in, sometimes I still struggle with distinguishing between a creative urge and an idea, because I'm a splenic authority. So my urges are always weird, and I have an undefined head, and I have gate 11, the gate of ideas. So I'm like, there's a lot of movement around this space for me. And the hack that I use for myself is that I just wait for a few days. That's it. If it's an urge, it will build. I'll feel the push. Within a few days, I'll be like, if I don't initiate this thing, I'm going to scrape the paint off the wall. I have to get this out. But if it's an idea, my attachment to it will have passed within a few days, right? By the time I get 2, 3, 4 days in, I'll look back on it and think, that was a cool idea, but I don't actually want to do it. Let somebody else have it. Yeah. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Just wait it out, wait the process out, and it'll show itself. We don't have to make an immediate clarity around it if we're not able to.
Yeah. It's so funny because this ends up the same. We end up in different not self themes, of course, but it ends up the same way for generators and probably projectors and reflectors, where it's, oh, I just do not have the actual energy to bring this to be. And for generators, of course, it's that like our mind started the party and then just assumed our sacral center was coming. The sacral center is, I'm busy that day, I don't want to come. So we don't have the energy for it.
I
And
love that.
Yeah, it's kind of similar for you. And there's so much power in the sacral center hooking into something and building on it. And there's so much power in a manifestor initiating. And that is energy that you guys really have to conserve. I'm telling Holly, like, she needs to be told this, but she was like preaching to the choir, that beautiful initiating energy that y'all have to conserve. And actually that brings me to another thing that I think is really fascinating is when I was reading your book, what really struck me was this conversation around boundaries for manifestors. Because Holly, I'm sure that you noticed this when you first started learning human design. There is a big conversation around boundaries for generators and manifesting generators, right? Say no, safeguard your energy because people want to use it. And I have to be careful with my hand gestures. Zoom, I keep forgetting to turn off the
thumbs up.
Yeah, it'll like you have this much time. Like, don't stop, please. Conserve your energy because this is your life force energy. You need to be putting it into the right things to build. But I never really honestly thought about it the same way for manifestors, because I've always seen you guys as with that closed, repellent aura, being like, no, thank you. You don't tell me what to do. I use my energy for what I want to do. But there are many ways that manifestors can give that power away. And it's not just through suppressing urges, right? So would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah. First off, when we describe manifestors in that place, describe manifestors with the closed aura and the immediate impulse to say no, and that kind of fierce protectiveness that we have around our energy, what we're really describing is a completely aligned manifestor. And the reality is that most manifestors aren't. It's a long journey to get there because we don't live in a society that has ever taught us that. We as non-sacrals have lived in a society that has told us to be generators or to be manifesting generators and to constantly give and to not ever say no, that we should be ashamed of our impulse to reject things and to push them out because it makes us intimidating or threatening or resistant or angry, or especially as females, like this horrible, why aren't you more submissive? Yeah, whole other conversation.
No, I'd
But
actually like to
I
go
think
there at
that
some point.
let's
Yeah,
circle
let's do
back
it.
to that. But boundaries are so important for manifestors, but not on that scale of everybody should have boundaries. Boundaries should be in place for all of us because we should be able to prioritize our own needs and then have boundaries around things that seek to dislodge that balance for us. But for manifestors, we have this kind of specific set, I think, of boundaries that we really need to learn and adapt. And quite frankly, we need to master them. Like we need to get so disciplined at them that we're using them more subconsciously, because our ability to initiate is so intoxicating to people. It's so inspiring in a really capitalistic society that is built off this kind of graveyard of people who've tried to be initiators and have failed at it, because initiating it's the golden archetype in this society, this ability to do big things real fast with that fuck you energy, like I will charge forward. That is what our society deems as inspirational. People want that and they want to capitalize on it. They want to take that and they want to make it industrious. So they want to make it consistent and available at that superhuman level all the time because it's inspiring. It's big, it's golden, it's sparkly, it's profitable, it's all of the things that society wants. So manifestors can very easily get into positions where people get really lit up by what they can do when they're in a creative cycle. And then that gets stripped from us. And we start having all of our initiating energy be used for other people's initiations, for other people's dreams, for other people's creations. This happens in the workforce, like all over the place. You put a manifestor in the workforce and they are going to work faster and better than everyone else, especially initially. And employers go, oh my God, this is amazing. This person came in and all of this new stuff happened and all of these new things got created and we're getting more money. And they want the manifestor to keep giving that. So we had this duality where manifestors, A, cannot sustain that because we are eventually going to crash into a rest cycle. we cannot operate at that level all the time. And B, we have manifestors who are giving all of that initiating energy away to other people. So we're not actually reserving anything to initiate our own creative urges. And that ends up with us either receiving creative urges and not initiating them because we don't have the energy all the time, or we just stop receiving creative urges altogether. And creative urges for us they're like our oxygen. We go through these really long, really deep, really challenging rest cycles, and the reward that we get on the other side is the creative urge. That's our life. That is I call it our drug. That's our heroin. We hang out for that moment and that thing that we're going to create. So when we remove that and we don't have it anymore because we have really loose boundaries or no boundaries at all, you've got yourself an incredibly angry manifestor, and usually a chronically ill manifestor as well.
Yeah, just listening to that, I'm obviously not a manifestor, and just listening to that makes me resentful. Like that, honestly, I'm just like, that makes me angry. Yeah, and it's so interesting too, because that kind of reminds me this whole idea that initiating is power. That's the golden ticket. That's what we promote, and that's what we put on a pedestal. You'd think that would benefit the manifestor. And in some cases, it on their own, maybe like when you're working independently, like that's the case. But it's funny. It's reminds me of, I don't remember who I heard say this. It's probably been said many times, but it's almost like patriarchal societies don't actually really serve anyone. They don't even really serve men. That's how it sounds here, right? Like initiation-based societies or societies that only hone in on that they don't even really serve manifestors at this point. And yeah, that's so fascinating. And it's such a bummer too, because I understand the mindset of when they came in, things started changing, and I'd like to bottle that lightning and let's bottle this up and sell it, basically. But it's so unfortunate because it's like how when someone can be around a generator who's really happy and can do a lot of work, they're like, you can do this work, right? And it's no, I hate that work. And so you're gonna do it anyway, right? No.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because it's that same, if you can do it in this situation, you should be able to do it for me kind of thing, which is just not the way energy works. It's not the way urges work. It's not the way responding works. It's not the way yada, any of these things work. And it's so cool to see it from this perspective too. And I can completely understand how on top of for generators, it's like, oh, I have to go into this job I hate every day. But at least we have the energy to do it until we burn out from sacral burnout. But we're going to last a lot longer than a manifestor would. So you're being put in these positions where it's now you're expected to work like this all the time. And not only is it not for you and it's not good for your body, then you can't even really do it because you don't have the energy. So damn. Yeah. Explaining that for
And
my
I think
generators who are listening.
But I think that everybody has their own experience of this, right? Take your energy type and plug it in, and the same thing is true. Like, I hate seeing all of this language around generators, especially in the human design community, of you just get yourself a generator and they're just going to build, especially in business, right? Like you're running your human design for your business. Like you get yourself a little generator and they're going to build things for you and they're going to sustain it. And I'm like, yo, what generator doesn't actually want to do that? Like, why are we treating generators like Lego people? That's not what they are. Like generators have autonomy. You
No.
have your own sovereignty. You are allowed to be your own individual. So I think that it's a symptom of the dysfunction that we have on a broad social level, that we view people and energy as usable commodities instead of sacred individuals that need to be honored and protected and loved and nurtured.
Yeah. Absolutely. We put the human back in human design.
Yes, I love that.
At the end of the day, that's what I always think. It's funny to me when people come to me asking me really technical questions about their design. Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do that? Or should this kind of person do this? I'm like, at the end of the day, or which energy type is better? We all know it's projectors. They win. They need that. That's why I said that. But at the end of the day, like it is just about being humans, right? So there are things that we could both say about our energy type or any of them. And it does apply to all humans because that's who we are first. And then we can look at our designs to help us human better. But so we did talk about, sorry, I have a million questions for you here. But yeah, so
it's
your book.
Fire now. Welcome to the energy of the manifestor. I'm sorry for unintentionally initiating you.
Oh, I love it. Never stop. Are you kidding me? I saw this hilarious reel the other day, and it was the actress Natasha Lyonne. She's in Russian Doll, like wild, crazy red hair. She was talking to Maya Rudolph. You might have seen this on Instagram.
I have. I love this one. You're an
animal. She's just
I love that.
But for anyone listening, it's Maya Rudolph and Natasha Lyonne. And Maya Rudolph is like, yeah, when I get around you, it's just, you're like, we're going to do it. And I'm like, oh my God, we are going to do it. And Natasha Lyonne's fist bumping. She's like, yeah, that's fucking, we are going to do it. And it's like when you're talking to your manifestor friend.
100%. I think the thing that you have to be aware of if you spend any considerable amount of time with a manifestor is they will genuinely make you believe that you can do anything.
Oh, yeah.
That you should, in fact, do everything and have this really huge life. And I love doing that with projectors in particular, because projectors are so like safety conscious, right? Like everything is methodical and considered and planned. And then they get around me and they're like, oh my God, I dream more now. Like you mean I can take risks? I'm like, baby, make your whole life risk taking. That's fun.
Welcome
the
to
beauty
my
of
world.
the manifestor, right? Like really do excite people and make them move. And I love watching that as a manifestor. I love seeing that impact.
Me too. Yeah. Well, your husband's a projector. Did you have that experience with him when you met him?
Oh, yes. My husband is from like regional Australia. He grew up on a farm. So his life was very normal. Like the trajectory of his life was you find another farm woman and you get a farm yourself and you have babies, and that is what you do for the remainder of your life. His father is a generator. He's got that very kind of like simple. It's a simple life. And then he met me and everything blew up. Everything changed. And we've
now
been
he
together for about 20 years now.
skydives.
We've been together for about 20 years, and he often says to me now, I had no idea my life was going to turn out this way. Like, I had no idea that I was going to do any of these things. And it's so cool watching him stretch and get excited by that. And he's always been incredibly supportive of just me taking him and my family down these weird and wild paths. He used to try to strategize it. But did you consider this? And what about this risk? And maybe we could do a smaller version. And I think after about the first 5 years together, he figured out that just made me angry. So he just started like leaning in. And now when I have any kind of urge or any kind of initiation that wants to come through, he's just like, great, let's go. I'm on board. He calls me lovingly, he calls me the freight train, because it's like you're on the freight train and you're traveling with the freight train, or you're getting squashed on the tracks. That's the only two options. And we have a manifestor son too. So it's like watching him get older and see that same movement happening. This is good. Like, this is the manifestor gold. As long as you're on board, it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have that defined heart center too, which is like throws this whole other thing. And I just, one of my coaches has a defined heart center. I call her Tony Robbins. She has, because she also has 2644. I call it the Tony Robbins channel, because like you're selling someone on their dream. What else are you doing? If I think of a channel that I would think someone would know NLP with, it would be like 2644. Let me help you realize your dreams. So yeah,
Yeah, we
absolutely
literally
beautiful.
are like the walking motivational speakers. Yep.
With all this said, there is something so beautiful about that manifestor initiation. But your book is called Informed. And that's because while initiating, and you said this on our last podcast, and I think it's so important for people to know, is that the true strategy for a manifestor is initiating. That's the mechanical strategy that you actually have. Informing is like a political strategy, as one of my manifestor guests said once. And she was like, I wish Ra
So
had made
cute.
that clearer. That's not actually your
Yeah.
mechanical strategy. And that's why it doesn't feel good to manifestors most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
But informing is such a key thing for manifestors to clear the path in order to initiate. You have a really cool story with learning to inform, and you did a whole experiment with it too. And I would love if you could share that so manifestors could hear it, because I know getting over that initial hump just feels like shit to a lot of
Torture.
manifestors.
Just feels like torture. My God. Yeah, I think that's the one thing that I'd shout from the rooftops about the manifestor experience, that believing that informing is our strategy is only going to take you down the wrong path, because it is not. Our strategy and what comes effortlessly and naturally to us is to initiate. We're doing that even when we're doing nothing. We're initiating even when we're resting. Just like the strategy for generators is to respond. You're always responding. It's naturally occurring. That's why it's your energetic strategy. Informing is a technique that we use to amplify the initiating and to make it more impactful. And one of my favorite ways to phrase it is from Amy Ruth, who is a projector. She has a manifestor son. And so she does a lot of like human design for children. And her son is 6 now. And she tells him that informing is how we hack the game. This is the way that we beat the game. When we inform, the rules of the game change for us. I love that way of doing it because it's such an empowered seat. But for me, like every other manifestor on the planet, like when I first learned, just like everyone else, oh, your strategy is informing, I was like, giant middle finger to that. Not, no, I will not. Thank you very much for the information, but I'm going to take a pass on it, because it feels like that is just the cruelest thing that you could ask us to do, is to tell you what we're going to do. Like, what? Why? Because every time I do that, somebody interferes, someone messes around with it. So it took me a long time to really, I think, delayer that and change the language and demystify it to the point where I really understood what the energetic mechanics were of what informing actually is. So all this language that we have around, oh, a manifestor just needs to inform before they initiate, and then ta-da, look at that, it's magic. The golden initiation appears, is really incorrect. It's so far off the mark, and it really leads manifestors astray, because informing is 100% just about opening up a little space in that closed aura and letting people see inside, even letting the universe see inside, or that external energy see in. So informing is not, I'm going to tell you what I'm about to do before I do it, because often we don't know. Informing is I'm going to let you see me. I'll let you see what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I want, what I don't want. If I have a plan, I'll let you in on the plan. Otherwise, I'll tell you that I don't have a plan and I'm just winging it. Informing is this vulnerability. It's an intimacy. It's an energetic vacuum that we create between us and other energies. Once I understood that, and really, looking back, I'm like, my God, how did I not get that sooner? But that took me a while to really understand that. And a lot of that was with the help of Day Luna, with Dana and Shayna at Day Luna, who are two projectors. And I was working with them for about 6 months earlier in my human design journey. And just that beautiful projector, like energy, right? The insight, like unlocking pieces, and it helped me reform the pieces. So I decided that if that was really what informing was about, then I was going to put that to the test, right? I needed to prove to myself that informing could actually be beneficial. Otherwise, I would never do it, because why bother? If it's not going to help me, why would I do that?
It always sounds,
But I
informing
also,
always sounds like it's for other people. So I
I know,
I get that.
right? But then the manifestor shouldn't ask permission, but the manifestor should inform other people. No, the vibe. But I also recognize that if informing was not actually our natural strategy, it was a behavioral technique, then I would have to dedicate myself to forming that behavior, right? That would have to be a discipline. I would need to form neural pathways around that in my brain so many hundreds of times over until it became unconscious, until that became my natural inclination to do around my energy. So I initially dedicated myself to do 1 month of informing. I was like, 30 days. This is typical defined ego, right?
I was about to say.
Challenge. Let me put myself into a discipline. I'm going to be really motivated for 30 days. And all I promised myself to do was just to inform once every day. That was it. I only had to inform once. It didn't matter what it was about. I just had to inform. And after that first 30 days, I started to notice that not only was it getting easier for me to inform, at first it was hell. Like those first couple of weeks, I was so angry. I was so angry. And I felt like a toddler. Like I couldn't get language around things. I'd go to inform and I'd have to like think about it and then get the words out, and it would be like choking on it, getting it out. But by the end of that 30 days, it was easier to do. It was more fluid to do. And I was really starting to see how it was opening some stuff up. Like people weren't resisting me. People weren't arguing. People weren't getting in my way. Like things were coming a little bit more clearly and effortlessly. So again, total defined ego moment. I was like, I'm going to keep going. Let's like expand this and see how big it can be. So I dedicated myself to a 6-month journey of it, of every single day for 6 months. And genuinely, like without any word of a lie, by the end of that 6 months, informing became unconscious for me. I very rarely these days forget to inform. Every now and then it happens, maybe a few times a year, and I go, why are things so janky? Why are everything so messy? Oh my God, I forgot to actually inform. But I really did. I formed those neural pathways. So now informing is part of how I communicate. It's how I interact with people. It's the basis of so many of my relationships. It's so infused into my work. And I think that it's one of the major pillars that is responsible for why the Manifestor community has been able to have such impact on people and has been like that beacon for people to come in, because we, not only me, but as a team, we mastered informing. We got so good at putting informing into everything. And it really does make things so much easier. It makes things so much more illuminated and big, and the impact so much broader. And when I run into situations where I inform and people don't listen, whereas that used to be such a derailing moment, like how the anger, like, how dare you? I informed and this was meant to be good for me and it wasn't because you're not listening. Now if I inform and people don't listen, I just move on. There was your chance. I informed, I let you into a little slice of what's going on with my energy. You're not on board, so now you're out of the way. That is it. And that, as a 4-line especially, there's no more like heartbreak involved for me in that. There's that fluidity around it of, cool, this is just how my energy is moving. So I think that whenever we get into esoteric language, we love to float in the woo-woo, in all of that. Like, oh, it's just the energetic practice. I'm just doing this and it feels this way and it moves this around and I release it. And we forget that we're in human bodies and our bodies need to catch up. And sometimes that's your brain. Sometimes your brain needs to learn a new behavior and you need to repeat that. It's like the deconditioning journey, right? Like half of deconditioning is just rewiring neural pathways in your brain. And it takes 200 to 400 repetitions to do that. I'm just such an advocate for manifestors when they feel correct to do so in really committing themselves to that process, because it will be beneficial. It will be, instead of always being under the weight of like, God, I hate informing and I didn't inform and now I have to push through this brick wall every time I initiate. Initiating can be so much easier and informing can be easier too. You've got to give your brain time to get on board with that.
Oh man, like what I'm sure sigh of relief for manifestors who are hearing this, because one, they can have some self-compassion, right? Because I love what you were saying about the rewiring neural networks. That's like the biological counterpart to this spiritual woo-woo idea of deconditioning energetically, right? Like you can see this actually happening in your body. This is neurologically proven. And then also the fact that it is possible. So you can give yourself a little bit of grace around changing this, and then it's also possible. I am somebody who is so guilty of being like, why isn't this happening now? If this is the way it's supposed to be, if waiting to respond is supposed to give me everything I want and put me on the right track, why isn't it happening now? Why am I not good at it yet? Why is it better? And also any manifestor who's, God, I can't get this like initiating or this informing thing down. Do you know how many emails we get from generators being like, I have a few questions left about waiting to respond. I don't really quite get it. It takes us forever to understand it. So you guys are not alone by any means. And you also are somebody who informs the universe on what you want. And that has gotten you some really cool stuff too.
Yeah. I was actually where I started, because informing other people is complicated. That's because as soon as you inform somebody else, they respond. And they might not exactly respond in the way that you wanted them to, or in the way that feels correct, or there's so many aspects to that can throw it out. I wanted safety when I started informing. And so I just started with informing the universe, or the source, or this kind of external energy that we exist in. And it was really as simple as informing that I wanted a car park. I just want a car park really easily. That's all I want. Or informing about people that I wanted to come into my space, informing about things that I wanted to experience, informing when I wanted space around me to rest. I started informing around healing wounds. I think it's a bit of a misnomer that manifestors don't ever need to be initiated. We still need to be initiated. Like sometimes when we're resisting going into some kind of journey because we're like, for that to start, I'm going to have to initiate it and I don't want to. So I'm just not going to. And we get like an initiating kick up the butt sometimes. And so I started using that, informing the universe to be like, I've got this area of wounding that like, I can't seem to grasp on, especially during deconditioning. I used so much of that in kind of an intense deconditioning period. And things would activate, things would come into my space that would trigger that wound. Resources would show up that would be supportive of moving through healing that wound. So quite honestly, I actually think that manifestors could pretty much stop at just informing the universe. Like I think that's really our divine relationship, is with that source energy. And if we're in communion with, that's really all that we need. But if you want to really have healthy relationships with people that support your manifestor energy and build you up and encourage you and get alongside you and work with you, you are going to have to master informing people as well, which as a 4/6, of course, for me, that was a no-brainer. Like, of course I was going to move into that because I can't do it alone. I need the people.
I was going to say something about that too, because I'm a 5/1. And just from the way that my aura is structured as a generator, like I need to interact with the outside world a lot more than someone like Hollywood. But I would imagine being that 5-line manifestor, not that they can't experience or feel hurt from rejection, but being a 5-line, I had a 5-line projector on a little while ago, and she said, relationships last as long as they last. For us, it's not that they're not important, but it's not the same as it is to a 4-line. And being a 4-line manifester, where one of the wounds of the manifester is being rejected by people who maybe just don't understand how your aura is built to be that big, and I don't know, it's not triggering, but initiating energy. Yeah, I'm sure that in the 4-line can be so sensitive too, right? It's what the fuck? What's your problem with me? Yeah, I can imagine that would be tougher. Have you seen a difference? I'm getting off on a tangent here, but have you seen a little bit of a difference between
Oh, yeah.
4-line and 5-line manifestors?
Oh, there are so many variants across the profile lines with
Yeah.
manifestors. I think it's actually the biggest distinction between manifestors is that profile combination. And yeah, 5-line manifestors, they have a double projection field because they've got the 5th-line projection field from that heretic energy, and they've got the resistance to the manifestor energy. So you'll find that 5-line manifestors, whether they're particularly 5-1s and 5-2s, a little bit less so among 3-5s because they've got that kind of 3 engage with life energy. But yeah, the 5-line manifestors will typically be the rebellious ones. They'll
Mm.
typically be the ones that are like, fuck you. They're angry a lot of the time. They don't want you in your space, in their space, sorry. They don't care if you're there supporting them or not. They're just going to go ahead. When we talk about manifestors being trailblazers, I usually think of the 5s because they are the ones that are like burning down the pathways because they have to. That's how they get through the world. Whereas 4-6 manifestors, we're so extroverted, we're so chatty, like it's community for us. We want to interact with other people when we initiate. We want to do everything through relationship. We're incredibly soul-centered beings. For us, it's about healing and connection and love and joining together. Whereas then on the other end, like 1-3 manifestors especially, generally won't inform because they don't care.
Sorry, I have a 1-3 emotional manifestor in my life who I love. Holy crap, does she get herself into some situations by not informing them and being like, okay, I'm leaving, bye. We're like, what's going on?
What? Yeah, because they don't,
Yeah.
there's no interpersonal friction for them. Everything is the personal journey. So that it is not their, I don't think it's ever going to be their natural process to inform other people at that level. Like my dad is a 1-3 splenic manifestor.
Mm.
He's in his 70s now. I don't think that man has ever informed once in his life. Like he's rogue. He just goes off and does his own
He's
thing. And
rogue.
he is. So people view that, if we take that out of human design, a lot of people view that as narcissistic. But for me, understanding that through the human design lens, I understand, oh, that's not narcissism at all. That's a 1-3 splenic manifester. That is a manifester that is all up in their own energy, in their own personal journey, doing their own damn thing whenever they want to do it. And that's very different to me as a 4-6. I want the people. I need the community. I want those relationships. I want that intimacy. I want to see the impact of what it is that I'm doing because that's what drives me forward. So I think definitely paying attention if you've got manifestors in your life, paying attention to those specific parts of them, it'll take it from, oh my gosh, this person is crazy to like, oh, that's a little bit lovable. Look at that 1-3. They're not ever really going to tell me what they're
No.
doing. They're just gonna go about and do it, and I'll just see the aftermath afterwards.
We'll figure it out. That's how I feel about like all of my 1-3 and 3-5 friends. I'm like, I'm along for the ride in this. I'm here for the plot with you. I love you as a person, but also 50% here for the plot. Yeah,
A
and I
reality
actually had,
TV show, right?
would you say?
It's like a reality TV show.
Oh, absolutely. But I also wanted to ask you because manifestors are notoriously hard to read energetically, even facially, even body language wise. You even said in your book there was a manifestor who you were like, you had her at your retreat and you were convinced she was having a terrible time. And turns out she was just like, I'm so happy I don't have to perform here. This is the best time ever. And what's,
Dude, that was a trip for me.
oh my
Like,
God, now
what?
you know how we feel.
Okay. I did get that little insight. I was like, is this what it's like for everyone? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Oh my God. The number of times I've had like first interactions with manifestors and been like, that person straight up hates me. And then met them the next day and they're like, how is your mom doing? And I'm like, what? I'm like, oh, you're the really nice person. But Yeah, you remember me? But for you, because I've always found you to be like quite easy to interact with, and maybe that's because you're someone who has informing down. Maybe that's for whatever reason. But do you think that maybe has to do more with the 4-6 profile? And also, have you ever been told that you're hard to read?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I actually think it's both in my personal case. I think that 4-6 manifestors tend to be the ones that are slightly more easily readable just because we're so much more interactive, right? We are warm and we're engaged and we're friendly. And so we have more of those mannerisms that people can read. But I do think that the way that my aura gets received has been greatly influenced by my ability to communicate and my ability to inform. It changes
Mhm.
things. I also do a lot of energetic practice around meeting people, like even doing podcast guesting like this, around allowing my aura to come down a bit before I engage in this. And that's a practice that is probably not ever used by any other energy type ever. Because you guys all have open energy. And the reverse is also true. When I go into environments where I don't feel safe or I don't want to interact, I will actively put up my aura. And the response from people is like this vortex, like people will physically move away. They cringe, they look at me weirdly. And I'm like, yes, that's what I wanted. Thank you so much for getting out of my space. But I have 100% historically, hundreds of times been told, like, you are hard to read, or you are resistant, or nobody really knows you, or, and I'm like, oh, I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like, I feel like I'm such an open person. Like, come on in. I want to interact with you. I want to have a relationship with you. I can talk to anybody. I love meeting new people. I love being around strangers. I love being around people that I know really well. So that's always inflicted quite a blow for me
Mm.
when people say that. And I think that's true of every manifester, because a lot of our conditioning is this internal narrative of, but I'm so nice. Like, I really am so nice. I'm so
Yeah.
lovely. I just want to like you. I just want to get to know you. That's all. And so it really does hurt for us when people say, I don't, what do you mean? I'm not reading that from you. I'm not getting that from you. And there's nothing that we can do about it, because that's the auric quality. That's how it's meant to be. We're meant to have this level of separation from people. So to me, for someone to really know a manifester, whether you have a manifestor partner or friend or kid, or you work with a manifestor, or especially if you are coaching a manifestor or teaching them in any capacity, really the responsibility is on you to work with that closed aura and to keep showing up and keep creating safe spaces for the manifestor. Because exactly as you just beautifully described, like, they'll come back around the next time and your energy will be more receptive to working with that closed energy. It's all just an energetic game. Your energy will immediately at first go, whoa, what? That is a brick wall. I'm not used to that. I can't feed in and I can't play in it. And you'll project a whole bunch of stuff onto the manifestor about, they're not friendly and they don't like you, and what are they doing here, and they're not really interested in you, and they're cold and they're distant. Give yourself more interactions with that person, create a safe environment for the manifestor, and you'll find that whole experience changes. Once you are in with a manifestor, you are in. To me, manifestors are the ultimate, like, ride or die people, because once we love you and you are somebody who is in our auric space and we know that we can trust you and you're safe, we are your absolute cheerleaders. We will be with you until the day that we each take our last breaths. Like, you cannot separate a manifestor from a person that they love unless it's with extreme pain for the manifestor. So it breaks my heart a little bit that aspect of the manifestor doesn't really get talked about. Really, when we love people, we love them hard, and we will love you forever. And we will be like the very first person cheering for you and the very last person standing when other people won't. And we will always be present for that experience. So there's so much value in just giving a little bit of time for your aura to relax around our aura, and the same for us. Right? Something really wonderful gets created.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're doing that topic justice of you've just opened my eyes to a lot of these perspectives on things that I have to say that I said we would dive into this a little bit. I think coming from a woman's perspective in this world as a manifester, I remember you said on the last podcast episode, you're like, we don't have a lot of manifester role models to look up to. We have Raw, and then we have Adolf Hitler. And like Stalin.
Stalin and oh
And also all men and I think that's also where people can get that idea that you don't really have to get behind that manifestor wall to understand because the wall is all there is and there isn't really a person behind there who can have triggers, who can have wounds, who because you are just seeing a blank wall right now, you are projecting all your insecurities onto because they're not really giving you back anything that keys you into what's going on with them.
yeah.
And this actually brings me to one of my last questions I want to ask you, which is about throat wounds, which is something that you talk in
Mm.
depth about in your book. And I've heard you speak about before because I think it is such a powerful thing. And I actually really relate to it with, I have someone in my family who's a pure manifesting generator, not a lot of other centers defined. So it's a very active and strong throat. And the way this person
Mm.
deals with, because they come off as a manifestor in a lot of the ways that they act with channel 2034, the way that they deal with their wound is reactive,
Yeah.
but there are also repressive throat wounds too. So would you mind talking a bit about that?
Yeah. The truth is that anybody with a defined throat can have a throat wound. We're talking about the shadow frequencies of defined energy here. But when we add the manifestor aspect in, where a manifestor or a manifesting generator has a defined motorized throat. So we have this like big kind of Mack truck behind our throat that when we speak, it changes things. I love the phrase that manifestor words create worlds. When that's why we're initiators. When we speak, things get created. So it's much more common to see throat wounds in the manifestor or the manifesting generator energy type because we have that intensification of our energy. So we've received a heck of a lot more reaction to it. But on that spectrum, we've got these two sides, right? The throat can get wounded into a repressive throat wound, which results in the feeling of I'm too much. People won't accept me when I speak. And so I have to repress it down. I can't say what I really think. I can't talk too much. I trap it in. On the other end, we have the reactive throat wound that comes from the place of I'm not enough, so that I need to speak more. I need to be louder. I think typically, like the most curious way for me to observe the reactive throat wound is when you get around people that they talk endlessly and it's a one-way conversation. So there's no gap in the conversation for you to actually respond or even vacate. They're just like they're trying to talk so fast. Get all of the words out. That's a reactive throat wound. People who yell, people who interrupt, people who talk over the top of you, that's a reactive throat wound. Typically, we do see a reactive throat wound more so in males, the repressive throat wound more so in females. And I think that's really reflective of that patriarchal structure in our society, that male manifestors and manifesting generators too really tend to get more celebrated for their initiating ability because that's seen as powerful and it's seen as desirable when a man does it. When he's creative, when he's rogue, when he creates his own path, it's like that's entrepreneurial. Look at him go.
Ooh, the secret sauce.
Right? And so they develop this state of when I speak, it's not enough because there's always a pressure on me to be more, to do more, to be more listened to. So they tend to develop that reactive throat wound. And females in a patriarchal social structure, we experience the opposite, which is why female and male manifestors are super different. Because the female experiences the world as when I initiate, I'm told I'm a threat. I'm told that I'm too much, that this is not acceptable, that I'm intimidating, that I need to be smaller, that I need to be less, that I need to be compliant. So a female manifestor expressing from that defined motorized throat often does have the reaction of shut up, like be smaller. We don't want to hear what you have to say. On an extreme end, it's really what results in trauma for a lot of manifestors. Because when a female manifestor's throat wound in particular occurs, it's usually in a situation where we were forcibly coerced into submission, which is what causes trauma for us. So I think that throat wounds are such a helpful topic for everyone, but it's no surprise to me that like manifestors and MGs are the ones leading the way talking about that. They're the ones who experience it on the front line. But the healing really comes down to the opposite. So if you notice that you've got a repressive throat wound, sorry, the healing is to speak. In those moments when you think that you shouldn't speak or you don't want to speak or it's too scary to speak more, talk more, sing, make noises. A reactive throat wound is, of course, the opposite. Pull back, listen, take a moment, connect in with yourself, let other people talk, express only what feels really correct for you to express rather than constantly looking for that validation from other people when you're talking. But to me, this is part of the fabric of really what we're moving through as a society, that if in human design, if all roads lead to the throat, then the people with the most powerful throats are, of course, the ones who are teaching the healing around how to actually utilize that energy center so that we can have more safety around it, so that we can have that depth of healing, but in particular, we can have that transmutation process. And the last little thing to note too is, because I know people will ask this when they watch it, can you have both a repressive and a reactive throat wound? Yes. You can swing. You can swing between both sides. You might find in some situations you're really reactive and in other situations you're really quite repressive. So that's normal. The swing is normal. It just indicates that the throat wound exists.
Yeah. And I was actually going to note that I know someone in real life with motorized throat who like is so female, is so uncomfortable expressing her needs in her relationships with friends or with partners, and it just like builds and builds until you're not listening to me. I need to have this reactive explosion, and it's obviously it's not my life, so I'm just gonna watch it happen, but it's very obvious to me as the observer. I'm like, interesting. I don't feel like if I told you to do anything you'd do it. That's fine, again, your life. But yeah, it's fascinating because I can see it swing and I'm like, I understand why this is so frustrating to you, right? And again, I would imagine conditioned as a woman, like you said, to repress this. And you said that you had more of a repressive wound, right? You would have been on that side more. Yeah. And I definitely do see
Yeah,
the
definitely.
reactive more with men overall. But of course, every man listening, I've met lovely male manifestors who are like, I don't feel like I can say this. I don't want to upset anyone. So it can be
Definitely.
anything. But to
Yeah.
all y'all listening, we don't forget about you. But I do think that one of the cool things about the manifestor community is I notice how many female manifestors there are, and how, because no matter your gender or sexual identity, if you're an initiator, that's a powerful thing that we need in the world. We need our manifestors to follow what feels good to them in their initiating process, because that creates ripples, beautiful ripples for the rest of us to respond to in one way or another. It's so funny. I think I told you this, Holly, the first time you were pitched to my podcast and I got an email, I had been being like, really want a manifestor on my podcast, but I want a manifestor who really is human design literate and knows what they're talking
Yeah.
about. And it would just be cool. And I wasn't like, I had no clue that there was a manifestor specialist out there. And then you just pop into my lap as something to say yes or no to. And I was like, yes, subscribe.
Ah, yeah, I
And
remember
that's really
that. I remember
cool. Yeah, and you
that.
initiated that to me. And also, I'm going off on just a love letter to manifestors. These things that you guys put out into the
Yeah.
world, into the void, you might not see how they impact us and how we respond to them. But there are certain ripples, I'll never know who they came from. A manifestor initiates on the other side of the world and a hurricane happens over here for me to respond to, right? But it really does matter. And we all play a part in this beautiful symphony that is human design and life. And it's such a beautiful thing because 50% of the population are women. And so I don't know if that translates exactly to 50% are manifestors are women, but you still have this role to play and you're just as important. All of you are. So I just want to say, I hope that you feel that you can share this with us and we appreciate it. So I hope that you, whatever your throat wounds are, I hope that you can work through them.
Thank you. It is genuinely always an incredible privilege as a manifestor to be informed in any way of our impact, because it is the greatest little irony for us that we genuinely don't see it we don't. We have these like blinders on, and I know that it's obvious. I know that to everyone else, they're like, did you not see the massive impact of that thing you did? And we're over here, no, I thought it didn't really do anything for anyone. So please tell manifestors how they are impacting you, even if you think it's really insignificant, because that's, for me, that's like the fuel that keeps me going in this, understanding that the things that are being initiated in the manifestor community in particular are actually impacting people globally. And there will be an extent of that I will just never ever see, but I'm so grateful for the things that people can communicate with me and inform me about. Like you just said, that's marvelous. That's magic. To me, that's manifestor magic. That's what we do.
It is manifestor magic. Absolutely. And I relate to this in a different way as a 5/1. I'm so interactive and I want to see how my problem solving or me describing things to other people is helping them. And so when I get an email from someone being who I've just like literally never met from like Slovenia or something, they're like, I loved this article you wrote. And I'm like, I have no clue how you found this. I did not promote this at all, but it helped you that. Oh my God, I love hearing that. Like it's my juice. It's my cocaine. Just give it to me. I run on that. So I can absolutely connect with that. But there's one last question I actually wanted to ask you, and it's random, but in the book, and actually you had a podcast episode about this as well. I didn't listen to it, but I saw the show notes when you're like, manifestors are not meant to respond. And then in the description, you're like, isn't responding the most draining thing to you? When you have to fill out a form, when you have to answer an open-ended question on a on a test or something. So what does it feel like responding, and why does it feel so draining, besides the fact that you don't have a defined sacral center, so you don't have that energy to consistently respond? But you also mentioned that your manifesting generator daughter expects you to respond in the same way that she does too. So what is that
Yeah.
experience like for you?
Oh, draining. It's hell. It's we are ridiculous. I have to laugh at us as manifestors because we are ridiculous about our sensitivity to responding. We're also ridiculous about our sensitivity to being told what to do. Like we get angry at road signs because they're telling us what to do. There's inanimate objects. We get angry at being forced to respond to anything. And we have to laugh, I think, otherwise we'll go mad living in that experience. But I really just think it's just an intensification experience of the non-sacral. So for all non-sacrals, it's not life-giving to respond. It's depleting of the battery because we don't have the defined sacral. We don't have the juice. We don't have the energy to respond, which means it doesn't give us anything to respond. It takes away from us to respond. And when we're living in a world that is entirely built on responsiveness, all communication platforms are about responsiveness. Social media is built on responsiveness. You get rewarded for engaging in responding, right? The workforce and the education system are built on responsiveness. So it's difficult for all non-sacrals. That's the baseline, is that it's physically taxing for us to respond. But when we add the manifestor quality into that, which is where we vary away from our projector and reflector counterparts, is that we're not just getting physically taxed by responding. We also have a closed aura that makes us push away from any form of responding because we are not designed to respond. We are designed to be the first domino. Like we're meant to be the ones that start the things that you guys respond to. We don't have any of the mechanics at all to respond. So for a manifestor, usually responding makes us angry. Even if we understand that logically, we shouldn't be angry at that. Oh, there's a form that I have to fill out that's asking me questions. Hey, why am I unrealistically angry? It's unreasonable. Like I shouldn't be angry at the form. I should be like a normal human that can sit down and respond to questions on a form. But the mechanics of your energy don't give a shit about that. They're just like responding. That's not what I'm meant to do. And I also don't have energy for it. So why should I? So manifestors not only have to move through that energy depletion, but we then also have to move through managing our anger, which I don't know if you've ever seen a manifestor angry, but it's no small thing. Our anger is big and it's really like energetically powerful and loud. And it takes a lot for us to move anger through our body, even in small amounts. And so a lot of us naturally, of course, and I think healthily in a lot of ways, we get conditioned to just deal. Just grow up. We live in a responsive world. You're going to have to respond to things like it's cool. But if like this, I get a lot of manifestors to, when they're struggling with this, to count the number of times across the course of a day that they respond to something, to tally it as they go, because we need to get, I think, a clarity and almost like a contrasted understanding of there's nothing wrong with me when I get angry and when I get exhausted by responding. It's because this is not correct for me in any format. This is going against everything for me. There is not one part of responding that is right for me at all. And maybe I've done it 203 times today. And that's a lot. Like, that's a whole lot to deal with. And so instead of getting caught in this shame cycle where we shame ourselves and say, I'm wrong and I'm bad and or I'm inadequate or I'm ridiculous for the way that I'm reacting to this, keeping that tally, at least for a little while, is helpful for us to give ourselves some compassion and some space. Yeah, it's reasonable that you're exhausted. It's reasonable that you're angry. It's reasonable that you're resistant to this because it's not correct for you, but we live in a responsive world. And so you had to do this thing that is completely false for you and completely wrong for you 150 times today. And that's a lot. It really is a lot. So from that place, it gives us an opportunity to start reducing some of that down. You mentioned my daughter, as a parent, I think you're a bit stuffed for a while. Parenting is responsiveness, and thankfully I only have one sacral child. My other two kids are a projector and a manifestor, but that's her design. That's correct for her. That's natural for her, and I'm her mother, and I'm in the most intimate relationship with her because I'm her mother. So yeah, that's just going to be a lesson for me. That's going to be a long running, deep journey for me to navigate with that and move through it and get some wisdom around it, probably for the remainder of my life, because I'll always be her mother, but certainly while she's younger and developmentally, it's correct for her to lean on me for those things. So my point is, sometimes we've just got to be realistic about it, right? Like, we can reduce responsiveness in a lot of areas, and in other ways we can't reduce responsiveness at all. So the goal is not to live in a world where we never have to respond, though every manifestor out there is probably like dreaming of that. I live in a cabin out in the woods alone with no one around me and no technology. Right? Like, we all dream of that. But we came to this world and we came for this experience. So there's got to be some growth in that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it so interesting, whether you have a defined or undefined sacral center, looking at all the places where there can be energy drains? Because as Holly was saying, as a manifestor, you don't have that consistent energy to respond. I do, but then I have that different problem of, I have this energy, so guess I'll just put it here, and you can just get so mindless with it. So that's the first thing.
But the
everything.
Second,
What'd you say?
Respond to everything.
And then we go to bed, we're like, why
decision making gets taken out of it, right?
Yeah. But the second thing that I thought was so beautiful is that's so true about the gift of human design, is that it's not just, oh, this thing isn't right for me. It's, oh, no wonder I'm feeling this way because this thing isn't right for me. So instead of getting so down on myself, I can take this step back. And because I know this is the way I'm built, not be upset at myself for being upset, not being frustrated at myself for being frustrated as a generator. And when I'm like, oh, it's just because I just haven't really been living in accordance with what's right for me. No wonder I get really upset when I'm obligated to do a lot of stuff I really fucking don't like, even though I have energy. No wonder when you're a manifestor, at the end of the day, you're going to get really angry if you have been needing to respond to all these different things. So even if you can't change that right now, and I'm sure there are small ways we can change this, but even if we can't make a big change right now, at least I can have compassion for myself for feeling this way. I'm not wrong because I am feeling this way. And that's a little meta. It's one step back, but I think that it is really just such a powerful thing that honestly, I haven't thought about in a while. So thank you for initiating me into that. But Holly, this has been such a great conversation as usual. And we have a great track run of 2 episodes. And
It's very consistent for me as an inconsistent being. We got 2 from 2. Celebrate.
meet you again in 2026. But yeah, so everybody check out Holly's new book. I will have a link below in the show notes to it. I'll have a link to all of her information in the Manifestor community. If you are a manifester, please check it out. I think it will be so helpful for you if you haven't already. You might already be at this episode because Holly and you're in the Manifestor community. In that case, stay there. But Holly, you rock. Everyone listening, you rock. And I will talk to you next time.